Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. My name is Chris Province and I'm excited because today we are joined by Dr. Jeff Simmons. Excited to have the conversation around values, ethics, and morals, servant leadership, just topics that I think are a lot of fun to dive into, and hopefully you all as our listeners will get a lot of value from. We are in the middle of our series on values, and so make sure that you go download the free guide that's available on our website. That guide will help you maybe clarify some of your own personal values and walk you through how these show up in your day-to-day, whether that's in your job, with your family, within your community. Just a lot of personal growth and development available there. So to grab that guide, just visit us at magicintheroom.com and you'll see that located there. Now getting to our guest, Dr. Jeff Simmons is here. He is the chair for the Graduate School of Business at Oklahoma Christian University. And I think Jeff and I are a bit kindred, and we have marketing backgrounds and have a real passion for organizational development and the growth of people. But, what I see in Dr. Simmons is his calling, in his ability to prepare people to be successful in business, and how he challenges students to kind of rise above mediocrity, constantly strive for excellence in both kind of thought, growth, and deed. And this idea of becoming is something real central to Dr. Simmons' work. So a lot of valuable experience. He's had a lot of international exposure, having lived abroad. He spent time living in Vienna, Austria, taught business there, was at the International Trade Administration for the U.S. Department of Commerce. Just a lot of rich experience. And I know not too long ago, Dr. Simmons was recognized with the Intercollegiate Ethics Bowl Pat Koskary Award for excellence in the field of ethics. And so Dr. Simmons is also the ethics team coach for Oklahoma Christian. And so I'm looking forward to learn more about what that is. And in his free time, Dr. Simmons spends time with his wife. His son, Jordan, enjoys reading, playing golf, athletic guy, plays basketball. And then there's so much just exposure to different cultures and the way business is done around the globe, having, visited so many foreign countries, probably 15, 20 places globally to understand how things are done in those regions and bring that knowledge back to us. So I just appreciate his willingness to, lead students, educate other professionals like us, and, carry messages through mission campaigns and his belief in people and faith. So thank you, Dr. Simmons, for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. You know what? I guess I should add that according to my students, I'm the world's best ethics coach. They decided to deem me that. However, I think that's kind of like the world's best cup of coffee in the movie Elf. It probably really isn't accurate. So, but it's good to be here. I look forward to our conversation.
Hey, we found it. We found the world's best ethics coach.
There you go. Yeah.
So happy for
not
that.
As good as that cup of coffee in Elf, I think so.
Right. Well, yeah, let's open up with that. Tell me what that is. So you're an ethics coach. What's that mean? How does that shape up in the kind of competitive collegiate world?
Well, so what it is it's an opportunity for students to apply ethical principles and moral values to different scenarios that are presented in society. So the ethics debate competitions are based on these cases that are, if you will, ripped from the headlines, and they're presented to students. And some of them are cases that are maybe very prevalent in news, and some of them there may be things that we never even heard of or never even really would necessarily consider or something like that. And so our team has to kind of just determine, well, what would be the most perhaps morally justifiable or ethical response to these situations. And Oklahoma Christian has been the Lord blesses us with really talented students. And so I think because of those talented students, we've had some success in the past, and have had the opportunity to participate in the national tournament after having success in the regional and the state tournament. And so we're little old Oklahoma Christian, and we often find ourselves paired against teams like, most recently we're at the national tournament, we were debating against Stanford, or sometimes we've had to debate against West Point and stuff like that. In fact, that's one of my more memorable rounds when my students had to debate whether or not an artificial intelligence drone should have a kill decision on the battlefield, and we were debating West Point at that time, and we had to give that presentation. So anyways, but really what it all is just, as I said, it's an applied ethics competition.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we have I know we're going to be talking a lot about values and how they inform our ethical decision making. And so that's exactly what that is. And so it's really, honestly, it's an add-on to my job. I don't have to do it, but it's actually my favorite part of my job was working with those ethics students. We have some meaningful conversations. The students learn what it's like to have civil dialogue, because oftentimes the teams that we debate against may not see things the way we see things, and vice versa, but yet we're able to have a good civil dialogue about really kind of important issues in our society today, and to be able to think deeply and to kind of give consideration to our values and how those should be played out in our world. It's really a good experience.
That's amazing. I was only half joking when I said, if I come back to school, can I participate on the ethics team? Because I think that's a competition I could have excelled at. I've never really found one, so I'm still searching, and would love to be a part of it. How fortunate, for those students. I think as you talk about that, and you talk about these cases and how those values and ethics kind of show up or are applied in the real world. Let's talk first about this idea that ethics being relational, situational, and dynamic. Like, depending on the situation I'm in, how do ethics look different? Doing business, say, here versus somewhere abroad.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in different cultural environments.
Mm-hmm.
So my values, I carry the same values with me, but the ethics of the climate may be different. Can you kind of talk through why ethics are relational and situational and dynamic, whereas values may not be?
Yeah, well, so that's really interesting because there's lots of different, it definitely has effect. The situation you find yourself in, the people that are involved in different ethical scenarios or dilemmas, if you will. That has a strong influence on our ethical behavior, and that influence can come maybe from a couple of different perspectives. One is this just the worldview that one holds, the values that one holds, and will kind of influence how we behave in different circumstances. For example, if we go all the way back to just kind of the worldview that people can hold, there are several different kind of moral philosophies, if you will, that people can kind of ascribe to. And, one that would place great importance on the views of the society in which one finds oneself. That's kind of what's called a cultural relativist worldview, which means, they recognize that different societies have different values. And a cultural relativist would then say, well, but you know what? No one society has the right answers. And so therefore, we can't say that our societal values are any better than another societal's values. And so therefore, if I find myself in another society, I should probably adhere to the codes of that society and kind of leave mine at home and live by their codes. And so that's kind of, so therefore they would kind of say, when in Rome, do as Romans do, right? Type of thing. Well, there may be some others that would say, hold on a second, because when you go down that road, that leads to some things that I may not be comfortable with. For example, they might say, you know, I don't believe that there's not a universal truth. I think there can be and is a universal truth, regardless of where we find ourselves. And they might also say, you know, if we follow that mindset of kind of a cultural relativist mindset that says, well, whatever is right is whatever society says is right. Well, that can be problematic because it doesn't leave room for moral progress, right? Because like if a society's values leads them to do certain actions, like for example, our own society, at one point in time, we deemed that slavery was justifiable. Well, a cultural relativist couldn't question the practice of slavery because that's what that society, our society at the time, deemed was good and right. Or, well, clearly we moved beyond that, which is great. But if you were a cultural relativist, we wouldn't question that. So I say that to say, so someone might say, then cultural relativism isn't it. There's got to be a different moral standard that that should guide our behaviors. So two people traveling to another country, one's a cultural relativist, one is something else, like say, I don't know, someone is believes in we should be guided by our virtues, our virtue ethicist or something like that. Well, a virtue ethicist wouldn't just do what the Romans do. They would say, well, what is virtuous in this case? And so regardless of what that society says. So two people, two different world philosophies or worldviews would behave differently in another country simply because of the values that they hold, the worldview that they hold, right? I think another thing that maybe would be different in those circumstances is just the culture in that we have been raised, right? We all have are influenced by our own cultures, and so when we find ourselves in a different situation, we're going to bring part of our culture into that, and so we're going to and culture. One way you can kind of define culture is just culture is kind of the rules that we have that guides our interactions and our actions and behaviors, right? And so, like for example, in American culture, it's just our culture. When we greet someone, we'll greet someone with a handshake, and maybe even say, "Hey, how you doing?" We don't really mean "How are you doing?" Right? We don't need a long discussion about that, and we kind of keep a certain physical distance between ourselves, right? We have this kind of 3-foot box of personal space. Well, where does all that come from? Well, that's just our culture, right? That's just kind of the right way to behave. We kind of keep that distance. We give a good firm handshake and we say, "Hey, how are you doing?" Right? Another culture, if I was to greet someone like that in a different culture, why they would say that's wrong. I mean, you're being too distant. You know, there's some cultures that are a little bit more, that personal space is smaller, and so so therefore we're kind of defining what's right and what's wrong just based on kind of practice, cultural practice. And so culture and values both influence kind of how we behave, and we kind of see that. I mean, to kind of put a little bit more structure to this, when we're talking about, well, what influences an individual's behavior, what I just mentioned, kind of this worldview that you hold, the culture that you hold, those all relate to this concept of what's my individual characteristics, right? And so the individual characteristics that one has will influence our behavior because that influences our ethical evaluation of our behavior. So that's just one of the things that impact kind of our moral actions. So our individual characteristics. However, there are really kind of three other things that influence a person's actions. In addition to our own individual characteristics, our values, our culture, the experience we have in a certain field or something like that, or our beliefs, especially our religious beliefs. Those are all individual characteristics. In addition to that, I think really kind of one of the things that really impacts our ethical decision making is just from the start, do we even recognize that we have an ethical issue at hand? Which so the authors of a very popular business ethics textbook are the authors called Farrell, and Friedrich. And they said, they call this concept of ethical intensity, which means, okay, I recognize that I at least need to pause and give consideration to this action that I'm about to take. And that action might carry moral weight to it. And because if I don't recognize that, I may behave in a way that, in one way, and than I would if I recognize that this may carry more weight. For example, I'm a professor, right? So since November, it may be a little bit easier for students to complete their homework assignments because they can just have ChatGPT do it, right? Okay, so if a student might say, I'll just have ChatGPT do it. I'll have to do, the professor told me to write this report about this topic. I could go research this report and write this report myself, or I could go to ChatGPT. I could type in the prompt and let ChatGPT write the report for me, and then I'll turn it in. Really, because there's no big deal to that. I'm doing the work. The professor just wanted me to somehow produce a report. I just happen to be using ChatGPT to produce a report instead of me writing it. So I don't see the big deal. That's pretty low ethical intensity. Someone else might say, wait a second, there's a principle here that is at play. And what's assumed by the professor is that the work that I turn in is actually the work that I have actually done. And it represents what I know and my own abilities. And so therefore, that person recognizes, man, when they open up ChatGPT and they're about to write the prompt, they start to recognize there may be an ethical issue here that I at least need to give consideration to. And so therefore, they might behave differently than the student who didn't give consideration to that. In other words, when one student sees a level of ethical intensity to a potential behavior, they might behave differently than the student who doesn't see or recognize that ethical intensity. So we have the individual characteristics, we have the ethical intensity. I think another thing that influences our behavior is just what's Farrell, and Friedrich refer to as opportunity. In opportunity, one of the easiest ways to kind of consider what opportunity is just, can I get away with it, right? And so in other words, if no one else is going to be able to find out your actions or see that some of the things that you've done, like if the professor can't tell whether the student used ChatGPT or not, the student may be more likely to use ChatGPT, right? However, if they know that the professor has some software that they can use to kind of verify whether or not there's another source for that, then the student probably won't use it because they know that they're going to be found out, right? That's one aspect of opportunity, right? Another aspect is just like, well, if there may be a potential punishment, but that punishment is so far removed from the behavior itself, we don't make that connection, and so then, we may just go ahead and with the behavior that might be punished later on, but we go ahead with it because we don't even give consideration to the punishment, right? There's opportunity for us to kind of to go through the behavior and maybe potentially avoid the punishment because it's so far removed from the actual action, right? And I see that a lot, where some people, we behave differently when no one's looking than when someone is looking. That's what opportunity is, right? And then I think the fourth thing that really influences our behavior is what especially in business would be organizational factors. Like, what's the culture of the company that we work for? What are their values? Because we'll be influenced by their values. What are our coworkers doing and how do they behave? Because we're very much influenced by our peers. What's the structure of the organization? What kind of governance infrastructure do they have? That would kind of mitigate any opportunity, like I mentioned just a second ago. So like more centralized organizations, the more authorizations you need, the more checks and balances you have. Whereas when you have organizations that are allow for more autonomous actions by their employees, well, then they're opening themselves up to some potential maybe misbehavior by employees because, well, there's no one watching, and that's kind of a concern one of the concerns people had when we had to start, we had more and more people being doing remote work, right? That was one of the concerns was, well, are they going to actually be working? I mean, how productive are they going to be at home, right? Because no one's watching them. We need them in the office where we can kind of look over them or something like that. Well, so that's just an example. So there's several different things that influence our behavior, and when you mentioned, the situation in others around us, well, I think that plays out in several different ways. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me because if I'm in a place, and we'll take something not maybe as criminal as theft of property, but let's talk about theft of time, like social loafing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where we're compensated by an organization or a company, but we're not actually doing work. If a cultural relativist was in an organization where social loafing was the norm, then it really ceases to be theft or social loafing, right? It's just the way things are done around here.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
And whereas if a virtue kind of ethicist was in the same organization, they would be like, well, why is everyone else loafing?
Yeah.
How come nobody's working?
Yeah.
Right? Like we should be doing these things.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think that's a little bit of a picture of how worldview plays out, and like what do we believe to be true. And I think that's where that's that call to leaders, like in order for us to have high levels of leadership effectiveness, isn't it like how important is it for us to know what we believe
as leaders or just
as leaders, right? To be effective as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, yeah. In fact, that's what I really encourage my students to give consideration to, because like when I teach ethics, one of the courses I teach is business ethics. In the very beginning of that business ethics class, I go through several different worldviews, and I tell them there's a couple of reasons I want to go through these different worldviews. Not because it's not to give you a menu that you get to choose from, but first of all, number one, these are the kind of the worldviews that you're going to experience out in the workplace, right? And so, but then also, I want them to realize that as we go through these, some of these are going to resonate with you a little bit more, which is probably going to tell you a little bit more about what your values are. But then I go on to say exactly what I think you're getting to is, as a leader, you need to know what your values are, because it's going to be so easy for you to. We are highly influenced by other people. I mean, it's not just the middle schoolers that's trying to do everything that everybody else finds is cool, right? I mean, we all kind of do that, right? And the problem, though, is then usually what happens is if we don't have a firm grasp of what our values are and then hold true to those values, we're going to end up doing stuff that we're going to later regret, because eventually that dissonance is going to build up too much in our minds and say, I know I did something that was against my values. And as a leader, it's even more important because everyone else follows the leader's lead. I mean, they call him a leader for a reason, right? And it is the leader that sets the tone, especially from an ethics standpoint, for the whole rest of the organization. Everyone takes their cue from the leader, at whatever level that is. And so if a leader, if she doesn't or he doesn't know what her or his values are, that's really problematic, because then you leave yourself open to the influence of others, and now others are making really important decisions for you and your organization because they're going to start driving how other people behave.
Is it fair to say that organizations have character?
Oh, absolutely. I think so. Some people will say, well, no, a company is just a legal entity that's on paper. Yeah, but I mean, companies are made up of people, and people have a character. And so therefore, I think companies have character. And it's always hard to put your fingers on what that character is or what that culture is. Character and culture manifests itself in behavior, right? Even Jesus said, from the heart comes your actions, right? And another way of saying that, I guess you could say, is, from one's character comes one's actions. And so I think absolutely you can say that organizations have a character, have organizations themselves have values, because the people in those organizations have values.
Yeah, and I wonder, if we kind of think about behavior follows structure, and knowing our values, is that is it possible, and I'm just thinking out loud, is it possible that knowing our values provides us as leaders the appropriate structure for our behaviors to then follow?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. If by structure you might mean kind of the rules of the game, or the rules that should guide our behaviors. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that those rules, that structure, is derived from the values that we hold, whether we recognize them or not.
Yeah, and then and that's, I think, why I believe that call to leaders to really get explicit about what they value and how they go about their days.
Mhm.
It's that if we don't have the structure that values create, or really explicit values create, then I guess any way we behave is fine.
Yeah.
I mean, because we don't have that orientation.
Hmm. Yeah. So I guess kind of to kind of give an illustration to your point about values driving structure, which then drives behavior. So I mean, so it kind of goes back to something you were saying earlier, how um when people have different values, will kind of approach things differently. You're talking about social loafing. I automatically, something triggered a memory of, so when I was a student in college, one of my summer jobs, I went home to Phoenix, and I was working for I was working for a company it was a manufacturing company. I won't say which. I guess I should probably protect those who may still be working there. I don't know after all these years. But so we were assembling a product, and so it was an assembly. I was on the assembly line, right? And the guys around me kept saying, "Hey, Simmons, don't work so fast because they'll raise our quota." To a T, almost everybody said that. Well, my values were, Jeff, you need to be responsible. You need to do your best. And that kind of came from this Christian concept of work as if you're working for the Lord, right? I was raised to do your best in everything, because it's a representation of our Lord, because I carry His name as a Christian, right? But then I was also raised as I should take care of myself. I'm responsible for my own actions, and so therefore, if you put those both together, then no one should be telling me that I should do the best I can, because I should recognize myself that I'm not working just for myself. I'm working for the Lord. Well, okay, so now I find myself as the dean of the College of Business at Oklahoma Christian, and I've got faculty members that I'm leading, right? Well, I lead those faculty members with those two values that my mom and dad instilled in me as I was growing up. So what does that mean? Is I just assume, okay, my faculty are going to probably should take care of themselves, be responsible for themselves, to do the best, most excellent work possible. Which means I give them some autonomy, right? Because I'm just assuming that they're going to, probably have some of the same values I have, because isn't that the way it should be? I mean, I'm thinking that, and I recognize that not everyone may have those same values, but so that means I give them a lot of autonomy, right? I don't check in on them all the time, or I don't tell them exactly what to do or how to run their classes or anything like that. And so, that's the way it was when I wasn't in the academy, and I found myself maybe working with, leading a group or whatever. I kind of give my people more autonomy, because I assume my values are, you should keep taking care of yourself, and you should perform your work to the absolute best capability that you have. Well, okay, so you're right. So my values, you see, have influenced kind of the structure that I've set up for my work group. And so I think leaders have to recognize that. And so they need to kind of be aware of how their values are influencing the way that they structure their groups and their organizations, because it will influence how people behave.
And that's, I think, just leaders continuing to take the time to evaluate those things and understand how what they value shows up.
Mm-hmm.
Understand kind of their underlying assumptions about the world, where they see conflict, and making sure they bring something intentional to those teams. And I think when we look at team behavior, let's play with this idea in that if we have a team dynamic, if everyone within this team shows up values forward, then that team can be higher performing than when the individuals on that team hold their values back. Because I guess my observation is, Dr. Simmons, when somebody's at the table and they have a perspective that's valuable to something we're working on, but they hold it back because fear of being judged,
Oh, I
right?
see.
Because now I start to, when I share my values in behavioral ways with the team that I'm on, and it's kind of like when you're on the manufacturing line and they're saying, hey man, like, you're going to raise our quota, stop making us look bad. If everybody just conforms to mediocrity, if we live in the fat part of the bell curve, then no one is at risk.
Mhm.
And in that way, I say, a lot of times the situations, the cultures we find ourselves in beg for mediocrity. They
Mhm.
beg for people to live in the fat part of the bell curve, because then no one has to be vulnerable. No one has to shine. We can all just get along, and every 2 weeks we get paid.
Yeah.
So how do you coach people to like have that courage to show up with their values in tow when they know they're aligned to the work their organization is doing?
Yeah, well, they say that's hard. I guess the way I would do it is, I mean, there's probably two things that need to be done. One is kind of the concept that Lencioni would talk about in his when he talked about the dysfunctions of a team. He said one of the dysfunctions of teams is when the team members don't trust each other. And one of the elements of trusting each other is sometimes you have to trust each other when you have disagreements, or in this case, different values, right? And so you have to build a culture of trust that says when we have disagreements, we can share those disagreements, we can voice those disagreements, and know that they're being voiced not out of spite or politics or something like that, but to improve the team, right? And
Mhm.
so first you have to establish this culture of trust. And then I guess I would say is I somehow try to convey to your people that when we employed you, we employed all of you. And a lot of times we say, people get employed because of certain technical skills they might have, or certain knowledge, or experience, or whatever. But really, to get the most out of people and to benefit the organization and our clients the most, we have to get everything out of everybody, right? And that might mean we need not just your technical skills or abilities, we need your values, right? So we need to work through that. I think the best decisions, the best results are usually brought about through struggle, right? If someone's kind of holding their values just to not rock the boat, or not cause kind of dissension, that may be comfortable, but it may not be best, right? I often tell my people, if you see something wrong, or if you see something I'm doing wrong, or some form of improvement that we can do, by all means voice it, because that's what we need. I won't be offended, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to in our circumstance, we're trying to provide the best education for our students in order to benefit society, because that's the role we play in God's kingdom, is to educate people in the most excellent way we can, so that they can be a benefit to their organization, so that their organizations can help the community to flourish, because that's the role that God has for business in his kingdom. And so therefore, the only way we're going to do that is don't hold back. We got to seek excellence in all that we do, whether that's making difficult decisions or bringing up difficult issues so that we can wrestle with them and move on.
Right. And I love kind of what you touched on there with spillover effects, that whatever goodness we create within the organization is exactly what gets taken home to the family. That's exactly what gets, carried over into our community. So if we want better places to live, then we can start by creating better places to work and interact in those personal relationships. The other side of that, we create a bunch of chaos and discontent in our workplace, what spills over,
Y-
right?
Yep,
So
absolutely. Yep.
I really like that. So I kind of, since we started talking, it's really helped put a lot of language to kind of the structure that values create, and this whole idea that like words on the wall, the mission, vision, values, promises, purposes, commitments, whatever we have as far as our ethos, within an organization, the words on the wall, um, it's like a lot of organizations have them, but they fail to actually create structure in a lot of organizations. So a lot of organizations that have their spouse values on the wall fail to live those every day. And I spent my entire career trying to understand why that's the case. And as I continue to mature, maybe I get a little more clarity on that. But it's one, we have to espouse those values so that people can decide whether or not to join or align within this work community, right? So it's important to have them explicit and espouse those values. But then if we don't activate them, then we are being like not trustworthy. If we say, here's what we believe here, and then a team member comes on board and they don't experience those things, we've basically injured someone from the get-go, right? They say, wait, they told me they believe this, but all their organizationally sponsored behaviors prove to me otherwise, whether it's the person they've selected to be my leader and what that person carries, or these, what I would say, organizationally sponsored behaviors, right? The communications plan, how we do performance management, how I interact with my supervisor, like those all strike me as a team member as being organizationally sponsored. In addition, my interviewing experience, like how I was selected, how I was communicated through that, our onboarding, our orientations, our recognition programs, our how we do corrective action, how we offboard. These are all organizationally sponsored behaviors. And you spoke to actions carry moral weight.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this ethos up here on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And we might believe this wholeheartedly, but there seems to be a lot of translation gap to those actions that are organizationally sponsored. So how do we close that gap? I mean, what do you see? What's your take on all of this? And
So, I laugh because when you said words on the wall, because we literally have here in the School of Business at Oklahoma Christian, we have 3 core values to our mission. And those 3 core values are literally on the wall. I could take you into a classroom and you can see them on the wall there. So I laughed at that and I thought, oh yeah, well, he's, ouch, he just stepped on my toes. But honestly, I do have an answer to your question. And I think, how do we take them off the wall and how we live them out? So, and I think the way to close that gap that you were talking about is, here's how we've done it here at Oklahoma Christian, because to me, mission is really important. In addition to teaching business ethics, I teach strategic management. And mission, I tell my students, a company's strategy and everything that they do should be driven by the mission. And because that comes from my Christian values, I mean, in Proverbs, we read that where there is no vision, the people will perish, right? So you got to have a vision or a mission, right? So those words have to be on the wall. But you know what? When God gave His people the law, He also told them to write them on their hearts, talk about them, and share them with your kids. And for 9 years, I've been the dean of the College of Business here at Oklahoma Christian, and I'm telling you, my students, my faculty are probably sick of me mentioning those 3 core values. When I stepped into this role, I literally had the mission and those 3 core values at my right hand at my desk. When I was making budget allocation decisions or programmatic decisions or whatever, I would look at those 3 core values and say, does this proposal or will this money or whatever, will it further those 3 core values of our mission? Does it help us provide a contemporary challenging curriculum? Does it help us build community? And is it consistent with our Christian values? Well, those are our 3 core values. When we design programs, we say, does it help us further those 3 core values? So they don't just stay on the wall. We are, to use the words you used earlier, we are very intentional about living into those core values, so much so that I continually talk about them as I come and as I go, right? I continue to to consider them as we consider the activities of this organization. And so I think leaders, putting it on the wall, that's actually, I mean, that's good because theoretically it keeps it in front of our eyes. But sometimes the effect of putting it on the wall is, okay, now it's on the wall, we can forget about it because I don't have to worry about it. The wall has to worry about it, right? No. As leaders, we need to continue to talk about those core values. We need to continue to weigh our actions and our decisions that we make as leaders against those values that we put on the wall. Otherwise, there's going to be this gap that you're talked about. So I think it's just you have to. I think it's being very intentional about living into those values.
Yeah, and I think this is why I will always be grateful for knowing you, Dr. Simmons, because deciding or being intentional about how intensely we choose to believe, how much resource do we place in activating those values? It is resource, right? To activate those values when the first time you touch our website, or when you're in our interviewing process, or the excitement at which we communicate to you, like, here's your offer letter, here's how you come on board. What sort of experience is your onboarding process, your orientation to the organization? Again, how do we invest in people to become coaches, to execute performance development in a progressive way? What sort of resource do we put in developing people to recognize other humans effectively for their contribution? There's this call for resources that are necessary to activate those values, but getting intentional, not just about what our values are and what are the rules that kind of guide how we interact with one another and our customers, but also resourcing these to the level of intensity we want them to show up within our organization. So kind of speak to me about, your take on how ethical intensity might play into how we activate that framework.
If ethical intensity is recognizing that an action or a decision carries moral weight, then yeah, I think you have to recognize that when we are constructing an evaluation program for our employees, that the things that we value in employees are those consistent with the vision and values of our organization. If we don't recognize that relationship, in other words, if we don't recognize that intensity, that's problematic, because then we're either going to start designing reward programs that is going to encourage our people to do things that we wouldn't want them to do. Kind of the old Wells Fargo example. They were offering bonuses and things for employees to create new accounts, right? Because they were trying to drive business. Well, what that did is that, yeah, they created new accounts, but they were all fake accounts, based on existing customers, opening accounts for customers who did not actually ask to open those accounts, right? Well, someone somewhere in Wells Fargo didn't kind of have the ethical intensity of going, wait a second, the way we compensate and provide bonus or evaluate our employees is going to drive them to a certain type of behavior that's inconsistent, I'm assuming, with the values of Wells Fargo. So you're exactly right. If you stop and give consideration to that this decision carries ethical intensity, and then that it relates to or may be counter to our values, then yeah, it's gonna drive how you behave. Yeah.
Well, and kind of thinking about it, bringing this around, I got a couple more questions before we break today, but it's avoiding the bad things organizationally when we think about it is also about activating the good things. And when I think about how your work around ethics ties into, I guess, more of my base around engagement and where does really good work come from? It's this idea that, and you just want to give structure to our listeners, considering those factors that go into ethical decision making that we covered earlier, the individual factors, the ethical intensity, the organizational factors, and the opportunity, right? Considering those as our ethical decision making framework, and that we're constantly being evaluated, and people are always evaluating where they are, where's their surroundings, how do they then alter their behavior or not based on the conditions that they're in. What is their, what is their awareness around their well-being? How do they choose to then behave to right whatever's next, right, for that person? That's Those ethical decisions are being made every second of every day by every person in our organization and by us individually. So as we frame these, like, how do we establish that climate that makes unethical behaviors less likely, but high engagement, high performance behaviors more likely? As leaders, we make sure we clear the ethical evaluation of our team members, right? Like, we're not doing things that would violate their morals, or we're activating those words off the wall and living them in our hearts. So we clear the ethical evaluation. In order to do that, we do have to clarify our organizational character. So taking the time to make sure that this is what we believe, here's how intensely we believe it, here's how we resource its activation. We champion fairness, right? That work and rewards are distributed fairly to avoid those types of injury. But then this last thing is about developing servant leaders, right? And how people that help people can really create climates or cultures where unethical decisions are less likely. And I know, Jeff, this is something that you care a lot about. Can we just spend a couple minutes talking about why? Well, one, if you can share, like, what is a servant leader and why are they important in creating really ethical climates where good work and positive decisions are made?
Oh, yeah. Of course, there's lots of different definitions of servant leadership that one can provide. I guess if I had to, the easiest way for me to describe a servant leader is to say a servant leader is one who looks out for the interests of others. That's the simplest way I can put it. That they don't consider themselves kind of entitled as a leader, but instead they are looking out to the interest of others. They humble themselves and do that. And so I think, and honestly, I think it's so vital to do that, because, I mean, if we're going back to the concept of spillover effects, imagine this. Imagine if a leader can truly take on that mindset of, I'm trying to look out for the interest of others. And so the first others they're going to look out for is the people who they're trying to lead. Okay. And so imagine that leader then says, okay, how can I help my people do their jobs more effectively? What is it that I can do to help them be more successful? And if a leader has that mindset, then that's just going to flow down, and all the way down through the organization to their client or customer, right?
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden, everybody in the organization is looking out for somebody else's best interest, and that's ultimately going to lead to not only I would argue, not only to the client and the customer, but to the community. Because now the organization, because again, organization is made up of people have values, if those values are, let's look out for the best interest of others. Now the organization is saying, how can we provide goods and services to help our community to flourish, but how can we operate in a way that helps our community to flourish? How can we be a good citizen, if you will, or a good neighbor?
Right.
Because now the beauty of this is, when you do that, I mean, if someone else is looking out for my interests, man, I love them, right? I mean, I'm like, man, I want to be around those people, because I know that they're not just in it for themselves, they're in it for me. And so then, of course, I turn around and want to do them. Now, I mean, so if a business does that, then the outcome would be they're going to probably be successful. I mean, you want to do business with someone who's looking out for your interests, right?
Right.
So what happens sometimes, though, is people don't view that as they don't view serving others as and being and benefiting from that as the outcome. They view it as that's the goal. Well, I just want to benefit our company. I want to do what's best for my company. Okay, well, that becomes the goal. Well, that usually doesn't work out near as well, because I mean, who wants to do business with someone who's just looking out for their own interests, right?
Right.
So I think if we say, you know what, as long as we look out for the interests of others, it's going to work out, usually, right? Because I mean, that's because people want to do business with people who are looking out for their interests. So and that all starts with the servant leader. It's the leader who says, I'm not here to tell you exactly what to do. I'm not here to just climb further up the ladder. I'm here to help you do your job better. And if somehow I benefit by doing that, great. But I think if I think you will, because people, if you've ever worked for a boss who's looking out for your interests, you're going to do everything you can to help your boss out, because man, you really appreciate them, right? And so I just think, yeah, servant leadership is the best way to lead. From a pragmatic standpoint, honestly, that looking out for the interest of others. I mean, I get that right from Philippians chapter 2. That's exactly how they described Christ, right? I mean, he didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped, but humbled himself and came to this earth to serve us, right? And so I think, and he changed the world doing that. I think if leaders want to change their world, look out for the interests of others.
And unless you're in a business that doesn't have a service component, it really positions the organization differently when that's the climate, right? And ultimately that becomes the culture. When our intention is to serve others, we do the things internally. That's where we get it spills over to our customers from our team members, not the other way around. We can't transact servantship or service. We have to live it, and customers will never receive something that a team member does not. Mm-hmm. So this idea that we have servant leaders that emphasize the follower development, kind of de-emphasize their achievement or glorification of their role or title. But it's this idea of having higher moral behavior, like being humble, responsibly using our power, having super authentic relationships, like true connection with the people we spend our time with every day. And now what's beautiful is like the science bears it out. So what do we see in environments where this happens? Like less workplace deviance, less organizational cynicism. Like, how can I be a cynic if I get to work with you every day? Right? Like it's not possible, because we have a climate where we're expected to look out for one another. And because we do it, it becomes our culture. Mm-hmm. And when you and I do it, everyone else around us does it, because it's not things that we teach verbally. Like we socially learn these things by seeing morals and ethics exhibited by the people around us. So I think if we want high service organizations, and service directly links to profit for your business, servant leaders develop profitability as well. Mm-hmm. So gives you more resource to go activate what you believe. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. The only thing I might add is and you're absolutely right. Of course, it's clear that especially in service organizations, you can see how servant leadership would work out. I would argue that even in like manufacturing companies, having the servant leadership mindset is also applicable, because going back to that job I was talking about where we were making this product. If I have that mindset of I'm trying to serve others, and if I kind of give the perspective of I'm making this product, and I know that product was going to be in the hands of ultimately our customer, if there's a slight defect in that product, I could move it along, and then therefore it makes it easier for me to hit my quota. But if I notice that defect and say, oh, well, hold on a second, guys, I got to redo that and redo it, because I know that's going to be in the hands of my customers, and I wouldn't want my customers to have a defective product, then I'm looking out for their interests, for my customers' interests, right? So I'm going to build quality into that product right from the beginning, not because of some kind of quality standard, but because of I have the picture of the customer in my mind, because I'm trying to serve them. And so I think it serve them through my product, through the physical product, right? That we're manufacturing. And so I think this servant leadership plays, yes, definitely. I mean, it's easier to understand in a service context, but I think also in a manufacturing or a product concept, I mean, um, I think it also plays out.
You bet. In I think the defect role, and then I think also if we end up manufacturing what could be considered a commodity product, maybe
Yeah.
we sell lumber, or maybe we sell cars, or right. So if we're dealing in commodity, right, all same sort of thing, right? Like that's a huge point, or maybe the only point of differentiation is the affinity and the relationship developed by service. So,
Not to get, I
great.
mean, not to get this off the rails, but I will say this. I mean, I want to recognize the difficulty we have in our society to really kind of focus on others, because think about how much of our society is focused on me, meaning like, I mean, in today's world, I want to binge watch whatever show I want, when I want, as long as I want. And so therefore that's how our viewing, just for example, our televisions, if you will, are set up. I remember I grew up in a time, and I'm really going to date myself, but I grew up in a time when we had like 4 network stations, and if I want to watch my favorite show, I had to wait till Thursday night at 7 to watch my favorite show or whatever, right? It wasn't about me. It was about when the network wanted to show it to me. Well, today it's like, well, I get that whenever I want it, right? On demand, right? Or I don't want to wait for my product to be shipped to me. So I'm going to pay for Prime, and Prime's going to send it to me when I want it to send it to me,
Right.
And so our society is so focused on ourselves today that it's hard for us to now focus on others. So it's a challenge, I think, and that's why servant leadership is so valuable, but also maybe kind of difficult to pull off, because we are being conditioned to think in terms of me as opposed to you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, but man, it feels good when we can take that time, when we can find that space to really focus in on others and adding value to our work communities and our families and where we spend our time. And that's so. I want to sing us out here. I want to ask 2 yes or no questions. I want to give you a chance to kind of expand on it after we've answered these, and a little bit of a hot seat thing. So here we go. Like, is leadership possible without morality?
Honestly, if I'm thinking that if I'm defining the term morality the way you're going to term it, I'm actually going to say it is, and that makes it dangerous, makes leadership dangerous. And the reason I say that, if I can go beyond just the yes or no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, think about it. We've had leaders who I would say seem to be devoid of any morality, that I would agree with at least, that have proven to be, I'll just say, effective. I'm not going to say good leaders. They've been effective.
Right.
Osama bin Laden, Hitler, I mean, they led people, and they were effective at accomplishing some things.
Their vision, for sure, right?
Absolutely. But I would argue they were completely devoid of any good morality, right? And so, I mean, you can kind of go, which is something that I've always said. I said, what's really interesting is the characteristics that lead to effective leadership. I think that can be used for good as easily as it could be used for bad. And so, to answer your question, unfortunately, I'd have to say yes. Someone can lead absence of morality, and that's where it gets really dangerous.
Absolutely. And then, I think a lot of times when we talk about especially in work environments, like we typically duck and dodge the role of faith, right? And spirituality and well-being, and just as being productive, healthy, vibrant people. Very just personal question. What role do you believe faith plays in business and business ethics?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think clearly, I'm going to be biased with this answer, but I think it plays a huge role. And I think, my personal faith has I hope has driven everything that I do, and in fact, through our discussion, I keep thinking, when we're talking about values and their effect on behavior, I would say kind of what James wrote about in his letter when he said, "Show me your deeds, and I'll show you your faith." Right, and so I think faith is really important. Our deeds are a manifestation of our faith, whatever that might be. And I think sometimes we're a little nervous about kind of bringing in our faith into the business world. I'm going to go back to the very, very beginning. With that ethics team, we carry the name Oklahoma Christian, and I'll be honest with you, my team members are often very nervous about trying to bring anything related to our Christian faith into our debates because of the way the judges might handle that, meaning they'll probably count against us because of that. And I always say, I don't understand that. We quote other philosophers. We quote Immanuel Kant or Aristotle or something like that. Why can't we quote Jesus of Nazareth? And even if one were to say, well, I don't know if there's a spiritual component to this, but from just a pure ethics component, I think the Christian values are a good ethic by which one could live their lives, whether they believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God or not, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think, why not bring those values into our work world? Even if you don't want to claim the divinity of Christ. Now, I would, but I think they're good values to live by. The concept of loving our neighbor, and the concept of looking out for someone's best interest, the concept of caring for those less fortunate. Why wouldn't we bring that into our business world? So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question directly now, but
perfectly,
I would say absolutely our faith can play out in the business world. At least, especially the values that our faith is based upon.
Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways that also sets us free, right? When we can show up to our workplace on Monday and be the same person we are on Sunday, the same person we are on Saturday, it is helpful. Get to kind of lean fully into our structure and what's in and on our hearts. So I just want, Dr. Simmons, to say thank you for joining us here, sharing your perspective, your insight, your experience. Thank you for just being a leader and always closing that gap between, what science knows and what businesses do. And so as we sign out here today, hold on, let this ring through. Okay, so as we sign out here today, maybe just any final thoughts, or if people want to get a hold of you, like, where would they reach you at?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me thank you for having me today. I really appreciate the work that you're doing with this podcast and professionally. So you are a benefit and a blessing to a lot of organizations. I know that, and you've been a blessing to me. I've appreciated getting to know you and working with you. So I greatly appreciate that, and I was humbled just by you asking me to be on this podcast. So yeah, people can contact me. I'm at Oklahoma Christian University. If they want to learn more about the university, that's oc.edu. Likewise, if they wanted to contact me, they can contact me at jeff.simmons, that's jeff.simmons at oc.edu.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to continuing our conversation. This is episode 152 of Magic in the Room. And Magic in the Room is hosted by me, Chris Province, Hannah Broderud, and Luke Freeman. This is produced by Ben West. All of our social media management is provided by Emma Holland and Michael Manfredi. Our theme music is by Evan Grimm. Make sure you check out his music on Apple Music. And this episode was recorded remotely using the magic of the internet. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. Find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com, and you can find all of our previous episodes at magicintheroom.com. Until next time, thank you, Dr. Simmons.